I'm the Book Baron. Welcome in, everybody. So today, I have my Christmas tree up in hopes that this brings you a little bit of holiday cheer while I wrap up my November reads, which were, to be honest, kind of a bummer. A lot of disappointments. There were still some winners, but a lot of me just going, that really wasn't that good. Which sucks because I had more time to eyeball read. I was coming off of a high from October because the books that I was able to eyeball read in October, I was really loving. So I was like, I got more time to read. This is obviously gonna bode well for me. And it didn't. It did not, unfortunately. So hopefully the Christmas tree brings you a little bit of holiday cheer while I go over some really bummer books. Also, quick side note, tangent, adventure before we get started. Kevin is around and he is very moody because I just got back from Thanksgiving in the Midwest. And so he's a little bit mad at me for having left him for so long. So you may see him. Also, if my arms just start moving out of frame randomly, I'm probably petting him. So just assume that's what's going on. Anyway, let's actually talk about the books now. So first up, we're starting off with a bang. I have Blackthorne by J.T. Geissinger. So this is a new release that came out just at the beginning of last month from her. This is Straube, and Bramble so graciously sent me a finished copy. I don't think I did a good job of showing you this in the vlog, but this is a really pretty edition that they have available. So anyways, I just wanted to show that off. Big thank you to Bramble for sending this finished copy to me after I had read and loved the arc, but we're already spoiling the review. So let's get into that. So this is a gothic, paranormal, dark romance. It's got a second chance element. So it's kind of this like enemies to lovers. We start things off. We've got Maven Blackthorne. She's returning to her hometown after about 12 years away for kind of a bummer reason. It's for her grandma's funeral. She hasn't really returned other than for this funeral because it's kind of, the hometown's kind of a bummer. Although her family's been there for like a really long time. They're a very well-established family there. They're kind of like the strange family, but she's got her daughter in tow. She's ready to attend this funeral, except for her grandma's body just has vanished. Nobody knows what happened, but her family does suspect, because they have a long-standing feud with the Crofts, that they might have something to do with it. And they have a massive pharmaceutical empire, so lots of money there. And at the center of this feud stands Ronan Croft, Maven's former lover, and also the son of the man that she suspects unalived her mother. So a lot of complicated dynamics going on here. As the mystery deepens and old secrets get revealed, Maven finds herself pulled back into the clutches of this small town and back into a reignited passion with Ronan. It does have that very distinct gothic feel. It's that creepy, spooky atmosphere, kind of those unexplained things, strange animal behavior, people creeping from a distance in the woods. Initially, that atmosphere and that setup are really the focus of like who is responsible. And then we kind of like take a little bit of a pause. We're still looking into that, but the romance then ramps up after that and becomes more of the focus because she needs Ronan's help. And the romance does have a very interesting complication that I will just like. I don't know if that's gonna work for everybody. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, but I have a feeling some people will not like how that's executed. So just a little bit of a heads up. But the romance is so fun because it's kind of J.T. Geisinger's typical humor and wit. The heroine that's like trying to resist and is a little bit snarky and has her defenses up, and the hero that's gone for her, but is also a little bit grumpy broody. There was a little, how should I put this? Cassandra Clare Star Wars like complication that was introduced that kind of just made me go, what and why? Why was that introduced? But that's not the most bizarre thing. You kind of have this like slow build where you have all these weird things happening that are kind of unexplained, and they just get weirder and weirder and weirder. And by the last 20%, I was just pacing and reading my Kindle. I was just like, the fuck? What? No, there's no way. What the hell? It was a lot of that. Although it definitely ramps up and kind of like jumps in intensity with a lot of this stuff, a lot of it is well seated at the beginning. This isn't like totally out of left field. Like, you know, something's kind of lurking in the background and then it ramps up very abruptly at the end, but it's not so bizarre that you're not gonna see it coming totally. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want you to go in thinking that it's like totally insane because I think it will feel too tame then. But at the same time, like if you're expecting a regular J.T. Geissinger book, she's like trying something funky fresh here. I don't like that I said funky fresh. That made me feel old. We're gonna move on. But anyways, I give this one a rating of 4.5 stars. And again, thank you to Bramble for sending me a finished copy. This is my first PR and I'm so excited. But so next up, we have Dear Reader by Tate James. This is the first book in the Devil's Backbone series. I almost said Devil's Night series, and that is absolutely incorrect. This is a dark romance. It's why choose, and it's bully / enemies to lovers, I guess. We have Ashley, and she is determined not to take any handouts. She wants to earn her her own way, even though her mother's new rich husband definitely wants to help her out. Her mom ends up applying for a scholarship that would allow her to go to a very prestigious university for grad school, and this is an opportunity that she cannot pass up. This means that she'll be going to school with her new stepbrother and his 3 friends, who seem intent since day one on tormenting her. And it's seemingly for the grave crime of existing. But when she gets to school, things start getting weird. When she arrives on campus, she ends up finding the diary of the gal who formerly lived in her dorm room, and it says some pretty eerie and spooky things that happened to her involving the secret society on campus. A secret society that she is now going to be involved in because of how her family got married in? You know what I'm saying. Because of who her stepdad is. She is now able to get into this secret society. And when Ashley's own experiences start mirroring what was happening in the journal, they start getting really scary because the writer is dead. I didn't really get the dynamics between the heroine and the heroes plural off the bat. I could hardly tell the boys apart, but I also couldn't really figure out why they even disliked her. It seemed to be kind of like, because plot reasons, obviously. They claimed it was because she was like, what is that called? Gold digger. They say it was because she was like a gold digger, and they start rumors about her. And maybe this feels childish because I'm a person that doesn't really take the insults of bitch and whore very seriously, because it's kind of like when a toddler calls you a poop head. That's not very clever. So why would I care if you called me that? So I don't know if that kind of impacted my ability to take their animosity seriously. The whole dynamics at the beginning, I just kind of felt like, this is a kind of a weak setup. I think because of that, I just didn't really ever care about any of the guys. I didn't mind them as side characters in the story necessarily, but I didn't want them as heroes. I didn't care about them being part of the why choose situation, because frankly, I wouldn't have chosen a single one of them. The secret society stuff though, that is where it was good. Painted as these rich people just doing rich people stuff, but then all of a sudden real harm and really scary things would happen to the heroine. Is this the boys? Is this even attached to the secret society? Is there someone else pulling the strings? And it leaves off on this wild cliffhanger because Tate James loves to do that. I mean, it was so intense, and I had to see where the secret society and the mystery ended up going. So I did give this one a rating of 3.5 stars. I did end up continuing on to the second book much later in the month, just to make things make more sense. I'm just going to talk about it now. The second book is called Watch Your Back. This one was such a disappointment. This had no plot whatsoever. All the fun secret society stuff pretty much went away. It was a lot of becoming closer with the boys and hooking up with all the boys. And we do get perspectives from the boys via like journal entries, and it's just them simping after her. And I was like, I don't think this adds all that much. That's very interesting, because I wasn't very invested in that element in the prior book. I think it really made this book fall flat. So I was just kind of like, blah, 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 get to the ending, and there's another really intense cliffhanger, and I was re-engaged because we're starting to get back to the plot. But I think at this point, I was just kind of rolling my eyes. We had so much time, so much book to get to this. This time, it felt really cheap. And so I think I'm actually going to call it here for this series. So this is getting a rating of 3 stars. It's fine. It was just really disappointing. Next up, I read Savage Hearts, also by Tate Geissinger. So this is a buddy read that I did with Lynn. This is the 3rd book in the Queens and Monsters series. It's mafia, it's dark romance, it's kind of rivals to lovers. We have Riley, and she is the estranged sister of Sloane, who was just in the prior book. Riley's caught off guard a little bit because she's getting this call from Sloane, and it's to announce that Sloane is engaged and she wants Riley at her wedding. Now, these two haven't really talked in years, but Sloane seems different this time, and Riley seems at least willing to accept the olive branch that Sloane is extending. So Riley ends up agreeing to go see her, not realizing she's getting whisked away into the lap of luxury, but also into the crosshairs of a Russian hitman named Malik, who is intent on taking his revenge. And that just might involve Riley. At the beginning of this book, it was really interesting seeing the sister's perspective of Sloane, because we've gotten Sloane's perspective on herself, we've gotten the friend's perspective, and she's just kind of been this fun-loving, yoga, hippie-ish type character. And so then to see Riley, who doesn't really get along with her, doesn't really like her, isn't charmed by her, it was a very different perspective to get. And I think what was really fun with Riley's character is that you get all the benefits of Sloane's personality. They make jokes constantly about how similar these two gals are, but it's more embedded in the mafia and there was more plot going on. So it was like J.T. Geissinger had written that second book and then she was like, wait, but I can do it even better. And then wrote this one. Oh, she got me with the humor. The hero, he just reads Riley to filth. As he's spying on the house, he's like looking for his target and he's like, wow, this poor unkempt girl, so desperate, she sold herself into human and really she just had like come off a plane and was like disheveled. I really liked that this was like the biggest and baddest of the heroes that we had, and we saw a really slow melting, even though we kind of got that instant chemistry, I'll say. Not that it's not insta lust or insta love, but that kind of instant chemistry, that instant connection that JT really does so well. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I think the only thing that I was a little bit put off by was like the initial first kiss. Kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, but once I was like, well, I'm just gonna accept this and move on, I just enjoyed the ride, and it was actually a very good romance. This one I'm giving a rating of 4.5 stars. So next up, I read something a little bit different. I read Once Upon a Demon's Heart by K.M. Moronova. So this is a fantasy romance. It's got kind of like a forced marriage or like arranged marriage-ish. This is about Alira, and she is a devoted demigod knight. She is trapped in a cursed time loop where she is killed time and time again by the Blood Knight, who is from the Demon Kingdom. Now, she is so sick of the repeated violence, of the constant dying, that she is determined this time around. She is going to break the cycle. So instead of going to battle, she decides to end the war in a very different way. She is going to propose a political marriage between herself and someone from the demon side. This idea, while unsavory, is much more palatable for her than what's been happening until they reveal the knight that she's going to be marrying on their side, which is the man that has been routinely killing her, the Blood Knight himself. Hallel is very feared, he's very cruel, but there's something about this version of Alira that slowly, very slowly, begins challenging his hatred of not only her, but of demigods in general. And while they might be working towards peace this time around, there's still a lot of dangers afoot as Alira resigns herself to live out her days in the Demon Kingdom. But before that can happen, they have to actually make it to their own wedding ceremony. Thoughts on this one? This one at the beginning felt really info dumpy. It just felt like we were really sprinting through this setup. That was mostly just at the beginning of the book that I really had to deal with that. With the plot though, I did feel like, although there was like some aspects that were attempting to make it feel like unique, the plot is literally just like, what if all your life you had been enemies, but it turns out the opposite side wasn't so bad? Gasp. Maybe you've even been lied to. Gasp. We've seen this before. The characters themselves, I actually enjoyed. I can't say that I ever felt particularly attached to them emotionally. Like, I understood logically why they felt how they felt, but sometimes they would talk about their feelings and I'm just like, yeah, that does sound like that sucks. And I do wonder a little bit if that's because of the length, because this was pretty short. Now, that said, I did like that we kept the tension between the two main characters throughout the entire book. Even though we did get some spice, we did get some friskiness, it was met with a lot of shame and distancing and reminding themselves that that person's the enemy, and they still don't 100% trust each other by the end of this book. So I do think that that will be beneficial later on in the series. I haven't had that like, oh, we're together moment quite yet. I don't know. I think overall my feeling with this book is like, it's fine, it's good, but it's nothing to write home about. Like, you don't need to rush out and read this. So I'm giving this a rating of 3.5 stars, especially because who the fuck is this man on the cover? The way they describe him in the book is like this hulking, scary, terrifying guy. And this guy looks like he's a Disney prince. Like, what's going on with this? Anyway, I just had to say my piece on that. Moving on. Next up, I have These Monstrous Ties, and this is by KV Rose. So this one is a dark romance, secret society, and it's kind of got like a rival families feel. On Halloween night, the heroine goes out dressed as Lilith, and she is, trigger warning, intent on taking her own life. She's barely made it out of her house when a man dressed as Lucifer, literally her counterpart, is like, I think you're supposed to come with me tonight. While she's kind of confused, she's also like, I'm already planning on ending things. Can't get any worse than that. I'll indulge this guy. I'll go along for the ride. This leads to a series of events which she barely remembers, but does involve her brother coming to her rescue. From then on, he is determined to toughen her up so that the next Halloween, they can get revenge against Lucifer and his friends and that little secret society. And her little dog, too. I don't even know how to explain this one. So this one I felt like through most of the book, I was just kind of like, what is going on? The concept for the actual scenes themselves was well established and well thought out, but there wasn't like a ton of connective tissue between the scenes. I didn't understand like the why behind a lot of stuff. During this first book, I didn't mind that it was mysterious. I kind of felt like, oh, well, we can't just like show our hand. It can't reveal everything. So even at the end, when I didn't 100% understand, I was like, well, that's coming in the next book. Character dynamics were also a bit odd. Beginning of the book, I was like, what in the incest is going on here? And that's honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, a little bit of a theme for this month. That was made even weirder when there was like interactions between hero and heroine, because they rarely interact. They hardly know anything about each other, and so it doesn't really feel like a romance at all. It really feels more like a book that's kind of about the heroine getting revenge. But I think if I had liked the next book more, I would have rated this book probably around like 4 stars. But because I disliked the next book even more, I'm giving this one 3 stars. Because Pray for Scars is the next book in this series. The second book in this duet that follows the same couple, but there's more books in the series. Does that make sense? Did I make sense? Probably not, but that's okay. We're gonna move on. So my thoughts on this one, because it is part of the proper series, we're not gonna talk about the plot. This felt like rinse and repeat. We got no more real answers. A lot of things happen, but there's no why. There's no like real satisfying reason. It just kind of felt like we were making up scenarios so that specific things would happen and not thinking about the logic behind like why that scene would be occurring in the context of the secret society, in the context of this rivalry. And I think it was more frustrating in this book because I had assumed, I had held out in that prior book thinking I'm gonna get these answers. I'm gonna get something. Things are gonna start making sense in this book. And then it was just more of the same. It's just a lot of vibes. And at this point, I was kind of disenchanted with the hero. And this one, well and truly, came for Cassie Clare's wig. Like, look at the who. This got dicey. My overall sense with this series is that I see what it could have been. But I think this should have been condensed down. I think this needed to be edited. I think if this had just been tightened up a little bit more, this could have been fire. And I think that's what makes it so disappointing, is it could have been so good. And then the ending really ticked me off because I sound like my mother. I was really PO'd. You guys don't know my mother. I just realized that. But anyways, the ending introduces a plot hole. There was something that they were like, we can stop the secret society from coming after us. And then I was like, wait, so we could have just been doing this in the first book. I don't know. This book was just painful. I'm giving this one a rating of 2 stars. Again, I enjoyed the energy of this book. The vibes are there. Like, there's so much that's so close. And that plot just really just under-delivered. But anyways, I'm gonna stop griping about this series and we're gonna move on. All right, so next up was my vlog book, and I read Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer finally. So I'm not going to explain the plot of this because I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this is. This is Twilight from Edward's perspective. This was just a fun nostalgic read. It was a fun way to relive and re-engage with Twilight. I think this was a little bit too long personally, but it was fun because I feel like we got to know Edward a little bit more. A few scenes from Twilight made a little bit more sense. Overall, it was a good nostalgic time. I think just based on the nostalgia factor, I would give this a rating of 5 stars, but I think if I'm being really honest, it's probably closer to a 4-star because that middle could have been tightened up. It was a lot of Edward just hanging out in his head, just thinking thoughts. But anyways, I have a vlog of that, and then I also go to Forks, Washington. If you haven't watched it already, I'll link it up in the cards up here. Probably haven't watched it because that video tanked. It did not do well, but that's okay. I had a really good time making it, and the people that watched it really enjoyed it, so I love that for us, but not for anyone else, apparently. All right, next up I have The Oath We Give by Monty J. So this is the final book in the Hollow Boy series. I think this is the 5th book. It's a marriage of convenience dark romance. So Coraline is our heroine. Why did that sound weird? Heroine. Okay, we're gonna move on. She was held captive by a very twisted individual, and in the process, she ended up developing some kind of twisted feelings for her captor. Oh my god, Kevin, you scared the shit out of me. He just bonked my elbow with his cone. Back to the task at hand. So only after getting out did she realize like how messed up the situation was, and she deals with a lot of guilt. So she's turned to painting and pouring herself into some self-defense classes that she uses to connect with other fellow survivors. And when that's all too much, she called a number that she never wanted to, but she just needed to pour her soul out. The person on the other end isn't some like unknown person. It's Silas. And this phone call kind of puts her on Silas's radar. But he's got a lot going on with him. His father has a cancer diagnosis. He's learning to take over the company at a much younger age than he thought he was gonna have to. He also has to be married because of a clause that his grandfather, I think, put in that CEO has to be married, and he hasn't even been dating anyone at this point. But he knows someone who can potentially play the part so he can fulfill his father's dying wish. So that was a little bit disjointed, but thoughts on this. I have a complicated relationship with this book because I enjoyed the story itself, but I think a lot of my expectations going into the book prevented me from loving this book as much as I could have. I think because it was the last book in the series, you know, they had built up this immense love between the hero and Rosie from the prior books, and her passing basically fueled this entire series. He's also got schizophrenia, and so there's like so many elements that I was really looking forward to exploring. I feel like a lot of the cancer diagnosis and taking over CEO and the marriage of convenience kind of took over, which is fine. It just wasn't really what I was looking for. But those elements were still present. So it did kind of make the plot feel like a little bit overstuffed because we also still kind of had to deal with these things, even though they weren't the focus. But that aside, if I just focus on the story itself, it was fun. It was fun. I love that the heroine kind of like end up walking herself into the arranged marriage. It was a fun, slow build. I like that the Stockholm Syndrome was dealt with in not a sexy way. Normally I read like Captor Captive, and so it's like a fun little hot thing, but this was very much like her dealing with a lot of guilt. And I like that when they were together, he really sees beyond her facade. I'm such a sucker for that. That said, I did find like part of her reason for emotionally distancing herself to be eye-roll worthy. When she told the hero why she was keeping her distance, she was like, don't make fun of me. But she never said anything about me not making fun of her. I think she's stupid. It was a really bizarre reason. I think the third act initially too felt a bit anticlimactic because the heroine made a dumb choice. Like she basically, Bella Swan, paper cut at the birthday party, waving it in Jasper's face. Like just why? It was such a stupid move on her part. And I was like, why are we doing this? Like when did she catch such a bad case of dumb bitchitis? But then more happened and it got more intense, and I felt like it actually helped wrap up everything in this story. So the third act was a little bit of a roller coaster. But overall, I enjoyed this. Again, I just kind of feel like it was a little bit overstuffed and maybe I had a few too many expectations going into this. But overall, rating 4 stars. So next up, I went into the deep dark depths and I read White Out by A.A. Dark. So this is the second book in the 24690 series. This is a horror romance, kind of. I don't know. The author doesn't really describe this as a romance, actually. I'm going to explain what the first book is about because this is one that you do have to read in order. So basically what we've got going on, there's like literally an underground secret society. Like they live like in the side of a mountain. They take people so that they can be owned by other people for, you know, very sadistic outlets. And there's not a lot of rules about how those people can be used and the harm that may befall them in the process. Our heroine is one of these people, and she's been with her master for a while, since she was like a child, and she views him almost as like a father figure. When he's unalive, she takes it very harshly, especially when she is initially suspected of being the person that has unalived him. What this means for her is that she's gone from a life of kind of like relative safety to now having the potential to be owned by anyone. She's going back up for auction. But a man or two that are very powerful in the society have their eye on her, and one of them just might be her salvation or her downfall. So the beginning of this one, timeline-wise, we jump right in where things end at the end of book 1. The ending of book 1 didn't exactly end how I thought. So when I jumped in, I was like, red alert, we're in danger. Action-packed immediately, but I think what was kind of frustrating with this beginning section, it was just like a lot of the same thing kind of happening over and over again for about like the first third. I didn't feel like we had any plot. I didn't know the direction this book was really going. I just kind of felt desensitized to a lot of it, and I was just kind of exhausted, and I really honestly wanted to skim. And frankly, after finishing the book, book, I do feel like that section could have been cut out entirely, and it would not have made a big difference to the overall story. This really felt like it was just for like the horror and shock value. Because there's a lot of things that were even set up that doesn't even pan out into anything. Things changed up in the middle, and I started getting excited because I was like, all right, we're changing direction. We've got a little bit of somewhere to go. In the process, it kind of wrecked the love interest, because I want to be so careful about how I'm phrasing this. The hero had an opportunity to insert himself to protect the heroine, and he didn't do it. But he does step in when his ego and his plans are threatened. And so it just kind of like ruined the love interest. And I think just in general, that ended up holding true for most of the characters. Like if you liked a character in the last book, you end up hating him by the end of this. I would say, honestly, I wasn't really enjoying this book for the first like 60%. And I had resigned myself. I was like, I'm done with the series. This is going to be the last book. Like I'm going to finish it, but this is going to be the last book in this series that I read. And then the last third, the heroine was once again being very strategic. Strategery. That is such an old reference. I don't know if anyone's gonna get that. But the heroine is very crafty. She keeps a lot of plans from us. And so that all started coming to fruition. And then it got really interesting. And the last portion was just like off the rails wild. So I was really excited to see where the story goes, because now everything's opened up so much. I just wish that this had been reduced down a whole ton. It felt like we went on a very meandering path to get to a place that we could have gotten to a little bit more easily. Rating of 3.5 stars, and I do plan to continue the series. And the next book I read is actually a continuation of the series. So technically the reading order for this series is you have 24690, Whiteout, then there's like a handful of novellas you have to read, and then it's the last book in the series. The novellas don't follow the same people. It's other people in the same universe. So I read the first of, I think, 3 of these novellas. And timeline-wise, this takes place right after book 2. This one is not a romance at all. It is just a horror. There is spice, and they're both like interested in one another. It's not a romance. There's no HEA. All right, whoopsies. Somebody's battery died. I had to wait for the battery to charge for a little bit, and then I had a snack, and honestly, I don't even remember where I left off, but I think I was talking about 27001 by A. Dark. I don't remember where in there I left off, so I'm just gonna re-explain what the book is about, and then we'll move on from there. But basically, this follows one of the scouts that finds like the people, and they snatch them and stuff, and he has in his sights a former model, so very, very beautiful, but current alcoholic and maybe potential drug user, and it's like him messing with her mind, kind of being nice to her, but also like just kind of mucking with her before he actually like snatches her and takes her to wedlock. They're both like very much interested in one another, but it's like kind of a twisted scenario. I don't think I'm really selling this, but regardless, I think that this novella was interesting to see another part of the Whitlock operations. And honestly, if this had ended in an HEA, I would have really liked this novella, although I do not feel like, and I could be totally wrong, but at this point, I just do not feel like this was necessary in order to be able to understand the rest of the series. Like there wasn't enough about our main couple that I felt like, oh yeah, we needed this to understand the insights from this angle. There was like one scene. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this because I did like the story. Ultimately, I don't really feel like I needed this. And so I think I was like a little bit resentful towards the book. So I'm giving it a rating of 3 stars because I just don't know what else to do with this novella. In a similar vein, I then read Between Two Kings by Lindsay Straube, and this is the second book in, what is the duet called? The Kiss of the Basilisk duet? I don't actually know if the duet's called that. We're just gonna call it that because that's the first book in the series. It's a fantasy romance, and it leans, I would say this one especially feels like it leans erotica, and it is love triangle. I'm going to tell you about the first book kind of briefly, and then we'll get into my thoughts on this because this obviously follow the same couple and the same timeline and everything. So the basic premise for Kiss of the Basilisk is there's 13 contestants that are training with basilisks, who are like snake shapeshifters, to teach them the power of seduction in hopes that one of them will win the prince's hand in marriage. And Temperance is one of the girls that's being trained, and she ends up getting matched up with Caspian, who is the Serpent King, and he has trained all of the recent winners for the past like handful of generations. So she was feeling a little bit more sure of her chances at that point. And then she finds herself not only drawn to Caspian, but the prince. And so then, we're caught between Two Kings. Overall, I was not enamored with this first book quite as much as, the second book, as much as I was the first book. I went into this book because I was like, I just needed all like the fun, bizarre, horny aspects of this world. But at a certain point, I just felt like it was like dragging out. Like the first third of this, I think could have been cut down significantly and it would have made absolutely no difference to the overall plot. And I think that's why it feels like it reads more like erotica than it does a romance, is because we're just literally fucking around for a good portion of this book. I think what was really frustrating about this book was that there's like things that are being seeded through the story. You're finding out little elements where you're like, oop, that's gonna be a problem. Oop, that's gonna be a problem. A lot of that just didn't pan out and turn into anything. We're teased with this MFM relationship. It just ends up being MF. So you've been warned. And we introduce another hero. We introduce another potential hero. And I was just like, why? Why? We already have two. The name of the book is literally Between Two Kings. And why is there another MMC introduced? And then there's like issues going on with the human kingdom, like the villagers are going to revolt. That never gets resolved. And then the heroine is like supposedly this very powerful being. She's weak this entire book. It felt like there was so much that we were like really working to like set up that just didn't turn into anything. And I think that's really what was disappointing. It kind of felt like either the author didn't really have a plan for the ending or was trying to go for shock value. I don't want to get too spoilery, but the ending was just so incredibly disappointing. You barely get any time with the endgame couple. I mean, it just felt really abrupt, especially for how much book we had. And honestly, we kind of ruined both of the MMCs during the process of this book because both of them show themselves to be pretty weak or ill-tempered at multiple points in this book after we had already kind of like established them as like a good person. This was just a really frustrating, disappointing read because of how it ended. I enjoyed the actual reading experience of this book until the ending. But then in hindsight, there was so much where I was like, that didn't build anything. What really ticked me off with this ending is that there are two tropes that are like truly my least favorite. Sure. Sound like Goofy. Spoilers ahoy. Skip ahead if you don't want to be spoiled. I'll put my hand up so that you know that I'm talking about spoilers. When it goes down, I'm done talking about spoilers. Start with the less spoilery one. The heroine loses her powers at the end of this book. So we're building and talking about how powerful she is, and she's trying to hone these skills, and they don't even matter because she literally loses them. So what the heck were we building to? And then the other part that pissed me off so much, one of the MMCs dies to resolve the love triangle. I hate this trope. This is like the fourth time I have read this, and I'm just so sick of that being used because it just feels so emotionally manipulative at this point. It was fun and like kind of fresh the first time I read it where I was just like, oh, rip my heart out. And then now that I've read it 4 times, I'm like, this feels lazy as fuck. Because what are you supposed to do with the other MMC? They literally just have to comfort the heroine because the other person that she cared about died. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna be done talking about this. I hated that. I hated this ending. It pissed me off so hard. I don't know how to rate this because like if I rated it based on like my general reading experience through the majority of the book, it would probably be like a 4-star. But because the ending was so bad and made me so angry, I wouldn't recommend this book. And so like I oscillate somewhere between like a 2 and 4-star. And honestly, I lean more towards the bottom end of that spectrum than I do the top. I don't know. It's such a conflicting and confusing read to try and rate. But I will say, if you are at all interested in this duet, just read the first book and pretend it ends after the first book, because honestly, it's a better ending than what you get here. It's not worth your time. Then anyways, let's move on. So our final book for this video, psych. Yeah, I forgot a couple books that I DNF'd. I don't know how I forgot these because they were deeply upsetting to me personally. I'm gonna breeze through these really fast and then we'll get to the actual final book of the month. But the first book that I ended up DNFing was Willow by E.M. Reagan. Can I talk? Hello. The basic premise is that the heroine's name is Willow, and she's at her house when all of a sudden her stepdad is acting real weird and looks like he might be eating her mom, and then there's also another guy acting real strange in the hallway that's trying to break into the apartment. So she calls the only person that she can think of, Jason, which is her stepdad's nephew. But they have a little bit of tension because he thinks that her mom is a gold digger, and to be honest, he's not wrong. But he comes and saves her, and then then I don't know, apocalypse stuff happens. I got about 15% into this, and I didn't mind the zombie outbreak, how that was happening. I thought that was kind of fun. I mean, like, your stepdad's chewing your mom's arm off. That's alarming. But I did not buy the dynamics between the hero and heroine for a split fucking second. And I was just seeing a lot of indications that this was a very contrived setup. Like, this guy, Jason, the hero, is the nephew of her stepdad, and he is way too involved in his uncle's shit. Like, you hate this girl because you think the mom's a gold digger? Calm the fuck down. She didn't do anything to you. And also, like, why are you getting in your uncle's relationship like that? He is a grown-ass adult. That's just fucking weird. And then when she calls him, he immediately is like, oh, good girl, baby, princess. Way too many fucking nicknames. Also, why do they have each other's numbers? That doesn't make any sense. If this guy hates you, how did you get his cell phone number? Also, as far as that goes, why didn't you think of literally any other man that you could have called? I could get into more shit that bothered me, but I'm gonna leave it there. I am not coming back to this. I just think this was honestly not that well written. And then I also ended up DNFing, but I think this is probably more of a soft DNF. If You Don't Love Me, We Die. And this is by, oh my God, I don't remember, something Stunich. You'll be able to tell what the author's full name is because the cover will be on the screen. Anyway, so the premise for this is basically that the family in this story that the heroine comes from has like true loves or like fated mates type of an energy, but it takes place in like the real normal world. They know that they've been matched with their person when they get like a burning birthmark basically on their wrist, and usually they're interacting with that person in some way. And our heroine ends up getting this burning wrist situation when she is driving the car listening to a very popular singer's song, and she's like, son of a gun, because he's like Taylor Swift levels of famous, but he's obviously a man, or maybe not so obviously, I don't know, they could be gay. But anyways, they basically have then a year to make their person fall in love with them, or they both die. So, you know, pressure is high. So technically I only got like 5% into this bad boy, but this is a really long book, so 5% is a lot more than you would think. But anyways, the writing isn't bad. It kind of had like a fanficky setup. I thought it was kind of fun. It like harkened me back to actual fan fiction days from when I was a youth, but I just felt like I was getting a lot of like bizarre info dumps in the scenes that kind of broke the tension. Like something would be happening and then we would go on like a tangent about like why the front door was always unlocked. And I was like, well, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that I care about that much. And there was a ton about boba tea. And look, I love boba tea. Delicious, yummy, yummy. However, I really hate when we're trying to use food as our personality trait. Based on how that beginning setup was happening, that I was like, oh, this is going to be a book that is not worth the page length. Although I did like the premise of the story, so there's like a little part of me that's like, maybe I'll come back to it. I don't know. Maybe I just got to be in the mood for a much, much longer book and not care about the overwriting and the unnecessary details and just be along for the ride. Anyway, now let's get back to the actual final book for this month. Our final book for this video is The End of All Things by Lissa Bryan. This is the first book in, I think, the End of All Things series. It's a proper series. It's post-apocalyptic survival, friends to lovers, age gap. Premise for this is that there is a virus that ends up decimating the world's population. Like there's barely anyone left alive. So it basically starts with like a fever, and then people lose touch with reality and kind of go into like a psychosis before succumbing to the illness. So there's just bodies everywhere. Carly, our heroine, has managed to survive by holing up in her apartment in Juneau, Alaska. Her life has basically been reduced down to caring for this puppy that she found that was kind of like starving in the streets and scavenging for food for both herself and this dog. When this guy sets up shop across from her apartment, and he's scary looking, he's rough looking, he's like former military, he's a biker. At first, she is really intimidated, very, very scared because she doesn't know if she can trust him, but he manages to slowly coax her out of her apartment and eventually convinces her to travel south before the winter comes, because winter is going to be very harsh. They're probably going to run out of food. And so he's like, well, you know where we need to go is actually Florida, because then we can grow food year round. And so they set off on this very perilous journey where there's issues with like the weather and injuries and supply shortages and other survivors that want what they have. So this is another book that was just a roller coaster read for me, because the beginning, the setup was so good. I really felt like there were so many unique things that just made it feel really well thought out. Because like, for example, one of the things that she talks about is how bad the grocery store smells because there's all this rotten food, power's been cut. So it's like milk is curdling, meat's going bad. And she's like, oh my gosh, this grocery store stinks so bad. And I'm like, that's never come up in not one of my post-apocalyptic books. That's such a good detail. And then also there was like all these tactics for survival where it's very clear that the author had researched this or was familiar with these tactics. And I loved that the hero and heroine, instead of starting out like rivals or enemies, it's just this like slow, quiet friendship, this building of trust. And so the beginning, I was like, hell yes, I love this. And then about like a third, halfway in, honestly was really tempted to DNF because the heroine is acting quite dense and she was like giggling at really small things. And so it gave her this very like childlike feel. I don't know how to say this nicely. The way she was written at this point felt like what an older adult who hasn't been 20 years old in a while thinks that being 20 is like. Like, it just didn't feel like a real 20-year-old. And so that was really frustrating. And then there's like these unearned moments of vulnerability between the two. And there's also like a ton of over-explaining how things were happening. Like, for example, like one point they're able to make a phone call. And instead of just the characters kind of accepting like for some reason the cell towers are working here, they happen to know that the cell towers are powered by solar panels. That's why this works. I'm like, if I was in that situation, I wouldn't know why the cell phone tower worked. I would just be excited that it worked. So there was stuff like that where I was like, we don't need all of this. And it felt like it kind of bogged down some of the storytelling. But then things like started to even out around the midway point. I was like, yes, I'm so glad I pushed through. It's just like that rocky little chunk where it was like, we couldn't figure out how to connect these pieces of the story. And we were getting more of these moments of like genuine conversation between the two characters, them trying to figure out like their relationship because, you know, they don't really know each other prior to starting out on the road. But then things got derailed again. We have animals that act a little bit too human. That one of the things with the heroine is that she's got just a menagerie of animals. And I'm just like, it's so clear that this author has never interacted with a horse. Because at one point she describes the horse giving a hug using its legs. They might bop you with their head or nibble at you with their lips. And they might even rest their head on you or lay down next to you. There would be other things. They're not going to use their hoof arm to like hug you. That's not how that works. And so I think the last chunk, it was a lot of them just like traveling and not really encountering any real issues, or if they did, it was resolved really quickly. And there's a lot of little inconvenient things that happen. And so it just felt like Hallmark apocalypse towards the end, even though like they have to shoot and unalive like a lot of people because a lot of people are trying to fight for resources. But it's just, it felt like there was a lot of emotions that just didn't really feel that deep or that earned. And towards the end, there was kind of these half-hearted attempts to introduce a plot because this is a series. But I was like, this could have just ended. Like, this could have just ended like midway through this book. So rating for this one, sadly, is 2.5 stars. Again, it's like a Hallmark movie. Like, it filled my time. It was enjoyable while I was kind of reading it for the most part. But like, it wasn't very satisfying. I gotta get going. I am rapidly losing daylight. Like I said, this was just a really disappointing reading month, unfortunately. I'm really hoping that December has some better things in store. Yeah, just kind of a bummer month, unfortunately. But with all that, I would love to hear from you. If you've read any of these books, did you feel similarly? Did you feel differently? How did your reading month go? Were there some winners that you had this month, some losers? What kind of mood was the month for you? I would love to hear anything and everything about how reading went in November for you. And with all of that, thank you so much for being here. I know these videos are always so long, so thank you for making it to the end. If you did like this video at any point, please don't forget to give it a like. It's a painless process, I assure you, and it really helps me out. And also don't forget to subscribe, especially if this is your first time here and you made it to the end. Good for you. That's really impressive. I would love to have you back for more videos, and I really do hope I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.